When someone hurts you, the natural instinct is to fight back, to explain yourself, to demand closure. But the truth is, every word you speak, every argument you start, every ounce of energy you give, only feeds them. It gives them what they want, your attention. And attention is power. But what happens when you take that power away? When you simply vanish? When your silence is the only thing they hear? That is when the punishment begins. You see, silence is not weakness, it's the ultimate form of strength. Absence isn't running away, it's standing taller than you've ever stood before. Because in a world addicted to noise, where everyone is shouting, posting, and begging to be seen, choosing not to respond makes you unforgettable. Think about it. When you stop texting back, when you stop explaining yourself, when you no longer show up in their world, you become a shadow they can't escape. Your absence follows them like a ghost. Every time they look at their phone, every time they replay the last moment you spoke, every time they expect you to return but you don't, you haunt them. The Stoics knew this truth well. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is to be unlike your enemy." And what is your enemy in this case? Their craving for your reaction, their need for your attention, their desire to keep you locked in their game. By ghosting them, by removing yourself completely, you don't just take away your presence, you take away their control. You remind them that you are not owned, you are not manipulated, and you will not be drained. Your silence becomes the mirror in which they must finally face themselves. And here's the paradox. When you are present, they take you for granted, but when you vanish, they begin to feel you everywhere. Absence turns into a kind of presence more powerful than anything physical. That's the irony. That's the punishment. So remember this. You don't win by shouting the loudest. You don't win by proving your point. You win by walking away, by holding your silence like a sword, and by becoming the ghost that teaches them the lesson they never wanted to learn. To understand why ghosting, done with discipline, is so powerful, you need to see it through the eyes of the Stoics. The Stoics were not men who wasted energy chasing what was beyond their control. They didn't beg for validation. They didn't pour themselves into the ungrateful. They lived by one principle: control what you can, release what you cannot. When you ghost someone, you are not being petty. You are not playing childish games. You are applying Stoic wisdom. You are removing yourself from a battle that does not deserve your sword. Epictetus, a former slave who rose to become one of the greatest philosophers, taught that freedom is found in detachment. He said, "We suffer not from the events of life, but from our judgment about them." What does that mean here? It means the betrayal, the disrespect, the coldness of another person. It doesn't have power over you unless you decide to give it power. And by ghosting, by cutting off your energy, you refuse to let their actions dictate your peace. Ghosting through the Stoic lens is not about making the other person suffer. It's about declaring your independence. It's saying, "I choose not to engage. I choose not to be disturbed. I choose my dignity over your chaos." Think of it like this. Marcus Aurelius ruled the largest empire on earth, yet he wrote in his private journal that the greatest empire a man can conquer is himself. When you ghost, you are conquering yourself. You are proving that you can resist the impulse to lash out, to argue, to cling. That restraint, that silence, is proof of your inner strength. And here's the hidden beauty. When you practice Stoic ghosting, you are not only punishing them with absence, you are healing yourself with presence. You reclaim the time and energy you would have wasted on someone unworthy, and you reinvest it into your own growth. You stop being their fuel, and you start becoming your own fire. So never mistake silence for weakness. In Stoicism, silence is strategy. Ghosting is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the art of stepping back so you can step into something higher. It's a strange truth about human nature. People rarely notice the value of your presence while you're there. They grow used to your kindness, they expect your attention, they take your words, your energy, your loyalty, as if it will always be there. And then, one day, you remove it. That's when the silence starts to scream. When you are present, they consume you like air, essential but unnoticed. But when you vanish, when you ghost them, suddenly the air is gone and they choke on the emptiness you leave behind. Your absence becomes impossible to ignore. Why is this? Because people are addicted to energy. Every text you send, every call you answer, every ounce of emotional labor you give, it feeds them. They get used to it, like a drug. And when the supply is cut off, when the constant stream of you dries up, they go into withdrawal. The more they depended on your energy without appreciating it, the harsher the withdrawal becomes. Psychologically, absence creates tension. Our minds are wired to crave closure, to seek certainty. When you go silent, when you refuse to explain yourself, you deny them closure. You become a riddle they can't solve, a question that echoes in their head. Why did he stop talking? Why did she walk away? Did I do something wrong? This endless loop of unanswered questions becomes its own form of punishment. And here's the paradox. When you were there, they felt they could always come back, always reach out, always have another chance. But when you ghost, you destroy that illusion. You remind them that access to you was a privilege, not a guarantee. And the moment they realize they no longer have it, that is when the value of your presence skyrockets in their mind. The Stoics knew this power. Seneca wrote that scarcity increases value, and nothing teaches scarcity like absence. When you ghost someone, you turn yourself into something rare, something they can no longer touch at will. And it's only then, in the cold silence of your withdrawal, that they realize what you truly meant in their life. So never doubt the impact of your absence. Your silence is not just empty space. It is a presence they cannot escape. When you vanish, you stop being taken for granted and start being unforgettable. There's a common misunderstanding about ghosting. People think it's cruel. They think it's about punishment, about teaching someone a lesson through coldness. But true Stoic ghosting is not about revenge. It's about discipline. It's not about making them suffer. It's about refusing to let yourself suffer any longer. Revenge is noisy. Revenge requires effort. Revenge keeps you tied to the person who wronged you. But discipline is quiet. Discipline is freedom. Ghosting is not the act of running away. It is the act of choosing yourself. It is saying, I will not waste another drop of my life force on someone who does not deserve it. The Stoics warned about this trap long ago. Epictetus reminded us, when another person does wrong, the harm lies not in the wrong itself, but in your response to it. If you lash out, if you try to get even, you have already lost because you have allowed their actions to govern your behavior. But when you walk away silently, when you ghost without rage or explanation, you prove that you belong to yourself, not to them. Think about it. Anyone can scream. Anyone can argue. Anyone can craft long, angry messages. But very few can sit in silence. Very few can resist the temptation to get the last word. Ghosting requires that restraint. It is the art of holding your fire, not because you lack the bullets, but because the target is not worthy of your ammunition. And here's the secret. Silence is heavier than words. When you ghost, you show that you are in control of your emotions, while they are left wrestling with theirs. You don't flinch, you don't explain, you don't chase. You let them drown in the very void they created. That is not revenge. That is mastery. Marcus Aurelius wrote, The best way to avenge yourself is to not become like the wrongdoer. Revenge makes you their mirror. Discipline makes you their reminder. Your silence, your absence, becomes a monument to your strength. So don't think of ghosting as cruelty. Think of it as clarity. It's not about them, it's about you. It's not about punishing their behavior. It's about protecting your peace. And in protecting your peace, you deliver the strongest message of all. I will not be moved by you. I will not be owned by you. I am free. Every relationship, every interaction is an exchange of energy. Your time, your attention, your presence. These are all forms of currency. And whether you realize it or not, some people are not just taking from you. They are feeding on you. They thrive on your responses, your emotions, your reactions. To them, even your anger is nourishment. This is why ghosting is so powerful. Because when you go silent, when you withdraw, you shut off their food supply. You close the tap. You stop feeding the fire. Suddenly, the person who depended on your energy to fuel their ego, their games, their sense of control, is left starving. Think of it like this. Imagine a parasite that cannot live without a host. The moment the host cuts off the connection, the parasite weakens, withers, and fades. That is exactly what happens when you ghost. They were feeding on your presence, your availability, your attention, and now it's gone. The Stoics would say, you own nothing but your own mind. Everything else is borrowed. Everything else is fragile. Your energy is sacred because it flows directly from your mind, your spirit, your soul. When you give it to people who do not honor it, you are squandering your most precious resource. But when you pull it back, when you hold it for yourself, you grow stronger while they grow weaker. And here's the irony. When you are giving, they may barely notice it. But when you stop, the absence feels like a drought. Your silence becomes unbearable because it exposes their dependence on you. They may try to provoke you, bait you, draw you back into the cycle. But the more you resist, the more the starvation sets in. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily not to waste energy on things unworthy of his soul. And that's what ghosting is. Energy management at the highest level. It is saying, I will not feed this any longer. I will not pour into a cup with holes. I will not be the fuel for your fire while mine burns out. So when you ghost, you are not just punishing them, you are saving yourself. You are reclaiming the energy they fed on and reinvesting it in your own growth, your own peace, your own empire. They starve, you thrive. When you ghost someone, you don't just remove yourself. You leave behind a mirror made of silence. And in that silence, they are forced to face something most people run from, themselves. As long as you were present, you were a distraction. Your energy, your words, your emotions, all of it kept their mind occupied. They could project their flaws onto you, escape into arguments with you, use your presence to avoid looking inward. But the moment you disappear, the only thing left is the echo of their own thoughts. That's when the punishment begins. People fear emptiness. They fear silence, because in silence, the truth emerges. The mask slips, the inner void speaks, and without you there to absorb their chaos, they must finally confront the emptiness they carry inside. This is why ghosting is not about cruelty, it's about exposure. You expose the fact that they were never whole, that they leaned on your presence as a crutch, that your energy was their cover for an emptiness they could never admit. And now the mirror of your absence forces them to see it. The Stoics believed that solitude was a test of character. Seneca said, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence on the future." But what happens when someone cannot enjoy the present without your presence? What happens when their happiness depended on the certainty that you would always be there? When you ghost, you remove that certainty, and their inner world collapses into itself. Think of your silence as a mirror with no cracks. It reflects them back to themselves in the purest way possible. No noise, no distractions, just the raw reality of who they are without you. Some will not survive that reflection. Some will do anything to escape it. But that is not your burden. Your absence has already delivered the lesson. And here's the paradox again. They may blame you, they may resent you, they may tell themselves stories about you, but deep down, the mirror of emptiness reveals the truth. They were never haunted by you. They were haunted by themselves. Your silence only gave them the chance to notice it. Words can be dismissed, arguments can be twisted, anger can be mocked, but silence cannot be denied. Silence is a punishment that cuts deeper than any insult, because it offers nothing to resist, nothing to fight, nothing to cling to. It is absence sharpened into a blade. When you stop responding, when you remove yourself completely, the other person is left wrestling with shadows. They can yell, they can accuse, they can try to provoke you, but your silence gives them nothing back. No fuel, no closure, no comfort. And that lack of response is what punishes them more than any explosion of rage ever could. Think about it. If you scream at someone, you release your energy, and in doing so, you give them proof that they still matter to you. But when you remain silent, you deny them that satisfaction. You leave them in the dark, with nothing but their own guilt, their own doubts, their own regret echoing back at them. The Stoics understood this well. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself not to waste his breath on those who could not hear wisdom. Why? Because the absence of reply often speaks louder than any argument. Silence does what words cannot. It forces reflection. Silence is terrifying because it is mysterious. They can't predict it, they can't control it, and they can't measure it. 1,000 thoughts fill the void. Are they done with me? Do they hate me? Have they moved on? Do they not care at all? Every possible scenario floods their mind, and all of them hurt. That torment is the true punishment of your absence. And here is the greatest irony. When you speak, they can dismiss your words. When you argue, they can fight back. But when you are silent, you become undeniable. You become the ghost that lingers in their thoughts, the unanswered question that keeps them awake at night. They can't forget you, because you gave them nothing to forget. So understand this: silence is not weakness. It is power. It is restraint forged into steel. It is the punishment that doesn't require you to lift a finger. And once you master it, you will never need to raise your voice again. Ghosting isn't just about them. It's about you. When you step back into silence, when you cut off the constant back and forth, you begin to learn lessons about yourself that no amount of talking could ever reveal. First, you learn the strength of restraint, the urge to explain yourself, to prove your point, to demand justice. It burns inside you like fire. But every time you resist that urge, every time you choose silence instead of reaction, you temper yourself like steel in a forge. You discover that real strength is not in unleashing your emotions, but in mastering them. Second, you learn the value of your own energy. When you stop pouring into someone who disrespected you, you begin to notice how much lighter you feel, how much clearer your mind becomes. You realize how draining it was to constantly respond, to constantly prove, to constantly feed a connection that only took from you. Ghosting teaches you that your energy is sacred and that not everyone deserves access to it. Third, you learn self-reliance. In silence, there is no applause, no validation, no instant reward. At first, it feels uncomfortable, but then something changes. You begin to hear your own thoughts more clearly. You begin to feel your own presence as enough. You begin to understand what the Stoics always taught, that the only true source of peace comes from within. And finally, ghosting teaches you freedom, because once you learn to walk away, once you learn that you do not need to react, once you learn that absence is more powerful than presence, you are no longer chained to anyone. No one can control you through guilt or manipulation or expectation. You become untouchable because you have mastered the art of letting go. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." Ghosting is bravery. It is the courage to stop feeding what weakens you. It is the freedom of no longer explaining yourself. And it is the silent declaration that your worth is not up for debate. So never think of ghosting as just something you do to them. Think of it as something you do for you. A teacher disguised as silence, a mirror reflecting your growth, a path back to your own strength. Now, ghosting is not about vanishing into the night out of spite. If you do it with anger in your heart, if you do it with the secret hope that they'll come crawling back, you've missed the point. True Stoic, ghosting must be practiced with discipline, with calm, with clarity. It is not an act of vengeance. It is an act of self-respect. The first rule: when you ghost, you do not announce it. You do not send a dramatic message saying, "You'll never hear from me again." That defeats the purpose. You don't explain silence. You simply become silence. One day the replies stop. One day the calls go unanswered. One day your presence disappears without ceremony. That quiet withdrawal speaks louder than any declaration ever could. The second rule: you must remain consistent. Silence loses its power the moment you break it. If you ghost but then check in or reply or fall back into old habits, you undo everything. The strength of ghosting comes from permanence. It's the unbroken wall of absence that punishes, not a silence interrupted by weakness. So you must hold firm, even when the temptation to reach back is overwhelming. The third rule: keep your emotions in check. Ghosting is not about sitting alone stewing in bitterness, waiting for them to notice. That's not Stoic. A Stoic uses silence as a tool for inner peace, not as a weapon fueled by rage. While you withdraw from them, you must turn inward, journaling, reflecting, building yourself back stronger. The silence should feed you, not consume you. And the fourth rule: know when to use it. Ghosting is not for every situation. It is not a tool for manipulation. It is a tool for liberation. You ghost when words are pointless, when explanations have been wasted, when the other person has shown they cannot respect your presence. That is when silence becomes your shield, your discipline, your strategy. Remember, Marcus Aurelius wrote daily reminders to himself not to lower his soul to the level of others. That's what this is. Ghosting, done properly, is not lowering yourself into petty battles. It is elevating yourself above them, walking away without a trace, and letting absence carry the message. So practice it with dignity, practice it with calm, and above all, practice it with the mindset that your silence is not for them, it is for you. At the end of the day, ghosting is not about disappearing from their life, it's about reappearing in your own. It is the moment you reclaim your energy, your peace, your dignity. It is the silent declaration that you refuse to be pulled into games, into chaos, into endless cycles of disrespect. The Stoics would tell you this: the greatest strength a man can wield is not his fists, not his words, not even his intellect. It is his discipline, to walk away when you want to fight, to be silent when you want to shout, to let absence speak when your pride demands an answer. That is power. And here's the truth no one wants to admit. They will feel your absence. They will replay the last words, the last look, the last moment you shared. They will scroll through old messages, wondering why the replies never came. They will carry questions they'll never get answers to. And all the while, you will be moving forward, untouched, unbothered, and unshaken. Because ghosting is not about their punishment, it's about your freedom. It's about proving to yourself that you are not chained to anyone, that you do not need to react, that your worth does not depend on being heard. It is the ultimate Stoic move, to walk away with calm, to remain silent with strength, and to let time itself deliver the lesson you never had to say aloud. So remember this: your silence is a weapon, your absence is power, and your discipline, that is the punishment. Ghost them, not to harm them, but to heal yourself. Ghost them, not to prove a point, but to prove your strength. Ghost them, and watch as the void you leave behind becomes the loudest message they will ever hear.